Well, don't have music for this, so I'm just going to play this for a little bit until I see people starting to come in. Or 8 o'clock runs around, whichever happens first. In answer to that wonderful question, I'm currently watching the answer. Yep. See what I can do on the volume.
Did you see that? Did you see how he turned?
There's the volume. There we go. Okay. Now let's get some of this covered.
Lock on my LC. General Zuko, you're currently engaged in unauthorized warfare on United States military personnel.
No. You engage me.
Repeat, you're engaged in unauthorized warfare on United States military personnel. Over United States airspace.
What?
Alpha. Mike. In other words, adios,
Well, let's do this. So take that, copy that, and go from there. So send that there. And we go there.
Baseball, napalm, or new? Oh, new guy.
Murdoch, burn the hell out of it. Like it was damn.
Burn the whole place down, buddy.
And we should be getting something here. Can we put it?
No. Not that antifreeze. The secret's out. You're crazy. Everybody knows.
No one can do an antifreeze marinade like you can, Murdoch. But I got a little Bell's palsy last time I ate that.
It's only partial correct.
Yes, sir.
Now
We're
you
having
like
that
me.
conversation right now. We will endorse that. I've got it well in
Yeah, I
hand,
don't think you
sir.
wanted me to be in the field partially paralyzed, bud.
Visitors. Yeah.
What do we got here?
Wow, I'm a little taken back. I'm not gonna lie.
Lieutenant.
There we go.
Sorry, am I supposed to lieutenant back?
No, you're supposed to call me Captain.
Captain. Captain.
That's
No,
right.
we don't
Captain
need
Crust. Look at you. Wow. I
that.
guess you said no to the kids, no to the family. Just no ladder you can't climb, huh?
No, honey. I just said no to you. Hello. My name's Percy. Would you like some?
What do we got here?
If I broke every bone in your hand, could you still do that?
This is crazy. 3 years? Haven't seen each other for 3 years. This is what we're going to talk about?
What would you like to discuss?
Did you take my Steely Dan CD?
I'm not even on to that.
We listened to it like 9 times in a row.
Okay. Well, this is what's called killing time when we get things organized.
Do you remember what it was we were doing? It was in Fenway. You don't remember?
The only thing I remember is leaving, which is my fondest memory of you.
You guys are the best. Stay out of trouble. Hear me?
Hate doing that. Send a message to the wrong person.
Keep that on. How we
Never do that. You go to text somebody and you forget to change the person you're talking to.
I know a company man named Glenn's back in the first Desert Storm.
I find it annoying, but the one thing I will tell you is yesterday, I was supposed to go live yesterday morning, but the computer mic completely tanked on me, and I had to wait to get somebody to help me get it put back together.
The only mint outside of the U.S. capable of printing our money belonged to the Shah of Iran during the
So
Iraq War.
that's why I missed yesterday.
Saddam had stolen it.
Yeah, the thrown back doesn't really help, but that's where things got complicated. And by the time I did get somebody in, it was way too late.
Well, sir, it's happening as we speak. Fedayeen thugs have seized what's left of the Iraqi National Mint to run off billions of dollars in unbacked American currency.
How they plan to move the plates and the dollars out of Baghdad.
Armored convoy, man with former Iraqi spec ops, high speed shoot to kill types. So how do you plan to stop it?
There's some rumors about some top secret plates being smuggled out of the city by Saddam loyalists. Do you know anything about this? Seriously, you're gonna make a play for this place.
You got too much going on.
Right now.
So if things are a little sluggish, that'll be why I have no idea how I'll be able to deal with that.
Ooh, okay.
Hey, get the memo. Tell your beloved Colonel Smith and stay the hell out of Baghdad.
Well, as we can tell, technology and I are not necessarily getting along all that well.
Well, this is me.
Now let's go back to here, shall we? Television.
Listen, I would never tell him this, but they are the best clandestine unit in the Fort Ransom, and they specialize in the ridiculous. Dad is taking the rest of them. Do not let them out of your sight.
Doesn't Diablo mean devil?
Yeah, man.
God damn it, Hannibal, what do you want me to do? If this were my operation and you wanted it, you'd have the mission. The Black Forest deployments. It's an international incident.
Oh, what do we got here?
Soldiers, the frat boys, the trigger fingers. Who's running the ground team?
Okay. Yeah, we're going to be live in about 10 minutes. At this point, it's just a question of keeping myself occupied while I get a few things organized.
We have been ordered.
But we'll see what happens there.
To stay out of Baghdad. Cut, dried, the end.
General, we should find him a little wiggle room, don't you think?
You know, I knew another Lynch. CIA stooge. Stationed in Laos, 68.
No relation.
Are you sure? Because you remind me of it.
I'm due in Kabul in a few hours.
I'm hoping at some point that things get turned around and, you know,
He's wearing body.
this works. Mind you, my understanding is it's going to take a little time to get things organized anyway. Essentially to get into some sort of a functional routine. So it's just one step at a time.
Now, I want you to know this is not about your losing a step. I want you to know. Hey, I'm 10 times the man I was when you met. Twice as fast. Russ.
Where are we?
I can get this done.
This is what's called killing time, so this seems a little drawn out. Well, it's because of the fact that I'm waiting for people to come online before I really get started. And besides that, I'm still trying to figure out how it all works. You know, which is, to say the least, a bit of a challenge.
You asked me not to make you beg. Right now, I beg you. Animal, please, let this one go.
But I mean, realistically, when you're having trouble with technology to start with, it always gets entertaining trying to figure it out.
That's true.
And absolutely, when we're talking about my technology, there is definitely a problem. One that I am doing my best to rectify, but not necessarily having a whole lot of luck on.
It's still a weekend yet. That's 9 to 5 stuff. Pops.
You know, the nice part about it from my end is it is getting things a little bit more in the open. You know, I have hidden from the world for the majority of my life. Turns out, you know, when I was a kid, I actually thought that people were pushing me away. The reality of it turned out to be far more complicated. Only I didn't find that out until, well, about 20 years ago, I guess would be the best way to look at it. You know, what do we got here?
No gliders, paper planes, ultralights.
Are you ever gonna let me live that down?
No.
Mexico was a long time ago, and I said,
See, whenever I get a friend request on Facebook, I always take a look at who the person is. Some people I won't befriend even if they know a lot of other people because of what they've got on their Facebook page. Because some of it just doesn't fit well for me. But that's what's called personal choice.
Oh, hell yeah, Hannibal. This is it right here.
this is bad shit insane.
It's perfect. This is beyond nuts, boss.
It gets better.
So who, pray tell, is the one friend that I have apparently? Not the one friend, but the one friend in common.
See if the boys at Black Forest can help us out. Press credentials. We need them. Hit the media tent. See what's lying around.
Sorry, my friend, I see you put the South African microphone at the bottom. You don't always put the CNN on top.
Oh, there we are.
There's 2
Oh.
legs. You gotta make sure I look.
Okay, well, we will deal with that.
Murdoch, we need a news camera. See what you can do.
Okay, we are 4 minutes from launch.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Still a little on the what you call it?
Listen, we don't care about code.
Still a little on the rough side here. Primarily because of the fact that I really don't have a lot of clue what I'm doing. Oh, well, we have somebody that has just joined. Welcome aboard. Don't know who it is yet, but guess that means we're getting awful close here. So, put that on pause. I was watching the A-Team and figured I'd watch it until people started to show up, or until 8 o'clock hit, whichever happened first. I wish I had been able to come on yesterday, but my mic was completely tanked, which is why I didn't do anything. Okay, that's why I didn't come on, because by the time I got it finished, I was already well over halfway through the time. Probably had about 10 minutes left to actually come online before everything else was booked. Net result, I missed it. Hopefully I can bypass that in the future, but we got the computer working again. Now, I'd love to show you pictures today, but that's just not going to happen. One thing I do want to remind you is, yes, I've got a topic, as in my life on Atlantis. But the reality is, if you've got questions in any other topic, doesn't really matter to me which topic. Put the question down and I will do my best to answer it. The reason I pick a topic at all is so I've got something to focus on. But I'll be getting into the details of that. As I said a couple of weeks, I think last week, we basically looked at it and went, if we wait until the 15-minute mark, or like until quarter after, to really start discussing the meat of it, I figured that'll probably work best. Okay, simply because it gives people a chance to get in if they're running late. And that's all that really boils down to for me. But that said, this is one of the reasons why I do it this way, because technology and I just don't get along all that well. But the reason, I've been asked for a couple of weeks now to get into the discussion of life on Atlantis. Now, understand, I've done very little research into it. I remember being there. I remember the events that led up to it. The thing that most people don't realize is Atlantis was not just one localized city. Okay, there was a lot of satellite communities that were built because of it. Okay, but because of the size of it, we had an interesting situation. Now let us go and see if we can get this so I can actually read what's going on. This is why I set this side up so I can actually go to it. See, I've got a link going to me so that I can find YouTube. Now, where are we? Don't need that. There we go. Okay. I've got a link going to me so I can find out what's going on. And now I'm just waiting for it to come in. And why are we not showing the questions? Oh, well. Thank you very much, Poetically Mistaken. I appreciate that. No, you're definitely not too late. I am going to be... We only just got started. Now, why, pray tell, am I not seeing that? That is not going to help. No, the reality is, yesterday I couldn't make it in at all. But I've only just gotten started tonight. Okay. The reality of it is that there's a lot of details that I run into on a regular basis, especially where technology is concerned. And there we go. Figured out how to get the screen up so I can actually read this. That's a bonus. I'm just looking at this here. I'm looking on my YouTube channel here. It's got a neat little blurb here. And it's amazing, I could go down that road, and that's probably a bad road to go down, so we won't. Angels Are Life. Welcome aboard. I'm glad you made it. Hopefully yesterday will be the last time I bother worrying about this sort of a problem and get through it. But who knows? I mean, technology and I have always been a problem. The neat part about it from my standpoint is this. Modern technology, as in binary communication, I have a lot of trouble with. Give me a holographic interface, I don't have a catch at all. The one thing I do, and I repeat myself often, I know that. Right now it shows we've actually got, although we've only got 2 people, well, technically there's 3 of us speaking, but we've actually currently got 5 listening in, which is great. Robert, welcome aboard. I'm still trying to get the hang of this whole situation. In case you're wondering why I keep looking over this side, I've got a monitor that's a little closer to me so I can actually read the comments coming in and track the questions a little more easily. Because let's face it, obviously these don't work as well as I'd like. I've actually got another set up front for driving now. But and to be clear, where it comes to Atlantis itself, I have not done research to speak of. I did look into years ago, I looked into the fall lines at Bimini Islands. And like I was saying, for me, this is not a question of research. Okay. Well, we'll get started with that right away. Poetically Mistaken is asking, in Atlantis, what was the family structure and familial responsibilities like compared to now? Well, the biggest difference compared to now would be that the males handled the military side of it. This was not a chauvinistic thing. It was not, oh, you're female, you're not allowed to be there. It was a question of males were far more weapons oriented, far more combat oriented, and they found that the females in general were much more inclined towards societal improvement. Things like modifying the architecture, that was done almost solely by the females. Males were involved in the heavy lifting, they were involved in the physical labor, they certainly got into the trades, but it was more an issue of males were more powerfully built and therefore took on the more physical jobs. They were also and they weren't, it's not, I was going to say they were more volatile, but they really weren't. But they were far more logically oriented. And here's the thing. In Atlantis, most of the males, okay, and this is not all of them by any means, but the majority of males went to work for the military, for civilian security, for that side of it. And understand, it started off with security being against the local wildlife. That's where it really became the issue, because when they first landed here, okay, they had no real functional knowledge about the lands, about the animals on the planet, never mind the people. So the men took care of a lot of the physical building, a lot of the security. The women, on the other hand, were focused more on medical, more on the engineering side of things, as in designing the physical structures, making certain that all the necessary things were put in place. Okay, like for instance, making sure when you put a building together, you had proper health facilities, as in washrooms. Every one of the construction sites didn't have a first aid station. Every one of the construction sites, okay, had a full medical team there in case. Okay. When we're dealing with family, it was very much a family unit. This was not a question of, oh, we'll see you once in a while. There was a very structured situation where you'd come in and supper time was at basically the same time. But it was done at the same time in different quadrants, depending on where you were. Okay, and this didn't mean, oh, if you were high society, you got fed first. It literally boiled down to where you were in comparison to where the facilities were located, to where the food facilities were located. Because what they ended up doing at the beginning, it was just normal people. It was just just little individual families taking care of themselves. But as Atlantis grew, as they had more arrivals, they had to set it up so that it was done on a commune-sized base. But what they did was they said, okay, the closer you are, the quicker we'll get you fed. And the reason for that was simply because get them fed to get them moved on. Like when they moved into working with a barracks type setup or a cafe type setup for expediency, because of the growth they were going through, it was literally a case of when they talked about first come first serve. You could be the general of the entire military cadre, okay, of the entire force, and you could be standing behind a pauper. The pauper would get served first. And there was no question about whether this was a good thing. There was never a question of, hey, I've got a better position than you, therefore I'm worth more. Okay, they were all treated literally the same way in that respect. Most of the medicine was handled by females, because with the Atlantis Society, most of the females had a much more compassionate side to them. Okay, which may not seem like much to some people, but in Atlantis, considering they were more concerned with whether or not things ran well and whether or not everybody got along. They knew they were on a mission away from their home planet. Okay, and they knew they had to stay together. Something that seems to be, really lax. Now, Atlantis itself, if you ever get there again, or get to their homeworld anyway, you'll find their society is still running very much the same way. And Angels Are Life is asking what kind of sciences were taking place in Atlantis. Advancements, what type of monetary system was in place. Well, the monetary system is the easy part. It was literally all digital. They worked based on a man-hour thing, on a man-hour percentage. Okay, you put in X number of dollars, your X number of hours of work. Or in their case, because it was completely digitized, you'd clock in, and there was no, oh, I forgot to clock in. If you forgot to clock in, you didn't get paid. It was just that simple. Okay, so people were taught very quickly, like at a very young age, you clock in, and you started clocking in up until you were 5 years old. You were free. Up until you were 5, you were free to go and come and go where you will. But then it was the parents that were responsible to make certain that you learned the rules. And the rules weren't a case of, oh, they applied to this level of society or that level. The rules were, it applied to life. If you got a job, even if it's a volunteer job, okay, as long as you were doing something to help with society, then what ended up happening was that you clock in and go, okay, I came in to help. I was here for X number of hours. And everybody carried around a placard with them. Okay, because all you did was picked it up, slipped it in the slot, it would automatically clock. And on the appointed payday, which really from our standpoint, they paid weekly. Okay. Every 7 cycles they would pay. Okay. And the reason for that was they originally tried it every cycle, but there became too many of them. And they just went scrap it. To make certain that there is no glitch, we're just going to cut that back and we're going to add it up, because people were going, I'm working 10 minutes, and they think that was good. Well, 10 minutes pay didn't buy you much. Okay. You can picture how much it would do for you in today's world. Okay. So the monetary system was completely digitized. The other reason for that is because they used the interstellar communication lines. So if you were working here, okay, if you were working here on Earth, on Sol 4, then you would get paid. Okay, but if you had a member of your family was working at home or had a business at home, and they were adding to the yeah. You know, if you had a family business at home, you could actually forward. There was a way where you could transfer money to Sol 4 to your other half, and thereby help supply you with stuff that you required. And this was just all completely automated. You know, people talk about backing the money up with something. It was backed up with manpower. You did the work and you didn't get paid. You know, it was just that simple. Okay. Now, of course, the sciences that were being looked into, they were looking at xenosocioeconomics. Even back then, Atlantis was looking at that. And the Atlanteans were a very adventurous group. And when they came here, they simply wanted to get to know the locals. They wanted to get to see how life was before technology came. And of course, when they got here, life on Earth was very, very primitive, as you can well imagine. So they came here looking to understand it. The first bunch of them did. Then there were people that started to come afterwards that just wanted a vacation. Okay. And I mean, they would set up all over the place. You know, like there were little outcroppings and out communities that were in existence. Okay, like they set up satellite communities. The Atlanteans did, but that didn't always work out all that well because they stuck when they set up the outlying communities. They built them with local materials. I mean, you got to understand they were very reluctant to share the higher tech. First of all, the people of that time on Earth did not understand the technology the Atlanteans were working on, because Atlanteans were working on gene splicing, gene splitting, cloning. You know, they were working on regeneration. They had already covered the idea of cryogenics and thereby long-range space travel. But the one that got them into trouble was the work on a self-sustaining energy power source. There we go. Draw a complete blank. Now, understand, like all the rest of my videos, this is live, which means I don't ever go back and try and edit it. I've never even looked at the editing room. Okay. But they were looking at all of this. They started doing xenozoological experiments, as in simply capturing wildlife and taking a look at them. But they relegated that, the doing dissections and what have you, they relegated that to the animals that were already deceased. They did not. They had an absolute ban on this whole idea of killing an animal to examine it. Okay. However, killing an animal or not killing an animal, examining an animal after it was deceased, there was no limit on. Okay. Now, the whole catch to it, you know, of course, the question comes up of, well, did the Atlanteans kidnap people? And the answer is no. Well, the answer is they encouraged them to come to their city, not to a starship, to the Atlantean city, in order to sit and talk to them. They did not jail them. You know, this was not a question of let's lead you in here into a trap. It was a question of come with me. I want to show you what we're up to. Okay, and tried communicating. They tried first of all with the leaders, But of course, the leaders came up with some brilliant ideas because there was a lot of conflict going on then, even amongst the peoples of Earth at that time. Only in manner of speaking, Robert Harris said, enticed with apple pie. Only in a manner of speaking. Yes, they were enticed. It's like, look, we'll show you how this works, but you're going to have to come into our city to see it. But what they do is they take them in there for a few hours and then they'd send them home. Okay. And the idea of apple pie is actually not that far off. Although I don't think they were using apples. But what they do is, see, the Earth Society at that time obviously did everything by hand. What the Atlanteans did was they'd bring the pie with them. Right, the Earthlings would bring the pie with them. And then the Atlanteans would take that pie, set it on the analyzing tray, and then replicate it. Okay, they would reproduce the same thing, but now they had it in the data buffer. Okay, and now they could produce it more readily. And then they'd send the replicated copy back so that humans could actually taste what it was like. This went well for a lot of time. The scientists were also they were also taking a look at atmospheric tests, geological tests, basically take a look at all of your sciences and then move them into the subquantum level. Okay. That's where things got a little complicated because, of course, the Atlanteans were working with holographic interfaces. Okay, and you've seen them shown on different shows, like on different of the science fiction movies. Where you see somebody, they've got the holographic screen up here, and you go like this, and you move something over, pull something in like this. This is actually quite normal. But the way it works is the human body and every corporeal body really generates a biomagnetic field, what many people call an aura. Okay, that is just like a film around the outside of the hand. So with the holographic interfaces, you get your hand close to the holograph and it would pick up this field, and that's how they could put their hand on the item and move it. Okay, the Egyptians, quite frankly, the ancient Egyptians had a similar thing, but they were working with spatial differentials. Okay, and that's a whole different ballgame. Okay, but the Atlanteans had visited ancient Egypt before they said, no, not before. At some point during their visit here, I don't actually know when the connection was made, but I do know they made the connection. Okay, so you take a look at all of the different technologies they had, and of course, it worked well for years. What do we got here? Okay. I haven't actually, in all fairness, Angels Are Life has asked, she's mentioned there's a hidden island off the east coast of Ireland, recognized on maps as early as 1325 on, and as late as 1875. And, and she goes on to say, I've been told the island contains a race of ETs. Could that race be Atlanteans? I haven't personally gone to check it out at this point, so I'm not certain if it is, but the answer to could it be? Certainly, because not all Atlanteans got off. And I'll get to the reason that happened. Like, there were a number of Atlanteans that were left behind. And due to the conflict, you can bet your bottom dollar they were looking. Now, I do know that Atlanteans had reached as far north that I was absolutely aware of as Stonehenge and southern Scotland. Now, from my standpoint, you've already got that far. It only makes rational sense that getting across from Scotland into Ireland would have been child's play for them, even with their limited resources that were left behind. Okay, and they certainly wouldn't have left them out for other people. because most of the outlying areas were done using modern technology, as in modern human technology. The neat thing with that island, if they haven't seen it since 1875, that means they got the holographic overlay done. They were working on technology that would, it's not that it would render the island, invisible. What it did was it would render the island optically invisible, because optically including technological optics, because what they were working on was a shield that literally all that would happen is you'd look at the front, it would project what was behind the island or what was behind your equipment, whatever it was. Okay, worked like an absolute charm. Exactly, Robert. Well, exactly. We are talking about. See, there's a few islands. There's different islands that are coming up. Something I do have to make clear, though, because I do not research many of these islands. I know they stretched from. I know the Atlantean Empire. Now, people talk about Atlantis being a city. It was not just a city. Okay, the main city was the big one. Okay, the main city that was talked about was absolutely their capital. But there were little communities that I know of. They stretched all the way from the edge of Antarctica all the way up into Northern Europe. I know they had research communities, research runs out into North and South America, but I do not know for certain if they locked down there. I suspect they touched down, but I don't know how much time they spent over there. My time on Atlantis happened to be in the capital city. Okay. And I was working on a lot of the energy systems that they had, which is why I know from my standpoint, there was technology that was being worked on. And the neat part about it was I knew the guy. I've actually met the guy this lifetime that built what became known as the OTE drive, the oscillant densification of the tri-transitant page-like polarity. That gentleman is alive today. Okay. Now, he's not alive as in he lived all the way since Atlantis. Okay. Well, it would make sense, in all fairness, angels are life. It would make sense when the Atlanteans were left behind. They were a scattered people, so it does make sense that they'd already made contacts, they'd made interactions with the different communities around them. It would make absolute sense that they would end up connecting and intermixing with them. And this is one of those neat little things when you take a look at it and you go, well, the records don't tell you this. It's all left in myth, which it is. Okay, the majority of it really is. The thing for me is I have to remember being there. Okay, but family life itself was very dedicated. Family was first. But everybody understood. Everybody in every family understood that if you're going to have a civilization, no matter what your family, no matter what your station, you still had to realize that the people that you were working with, if they weren't able to do their job, then it was not beneath you. If it needed doing, get off your tail and do it. This idea that is in today's world where so many people of higher standing go, it's not my job, I'm not touching it. Okay, I watched the equivalent of Atlantean high society grab squeegees and wash their own windows because they needed doing, and the other people that were supposed to be doing it, for one reason or another, weren't able to. there was never this issue of, I've got so much money, I don't have to work. There was never this idea of, oh, I'm sorry, you lost a limb, that makes you a lesser person, let's throw you off the balcony. Thing that they were working on, because the Atlanteans had taken medical society, and they had taken their medical practice to a full-blown operation. Somebody lost a limb, yeah, they were working on regen, but they also had cybernetics. Meaning, if you lost something and you couldn't afford to have it replaced, the Atlantean Society looked at it this way: we can't afford to have you not able to work. Now, were there criminals? Certainly. Were there murders and that sort of thing? Absolutely. Okay, and there were some periods where it got really, really testy when decisions were made by the people that were sitting in power that many of the people of the population did not approve of. Okay, because as with all societies, some people get in their head that because they are physically more capable than others, that puts them in a better position. Intriguingly enough, the leaders of the Atlantean military were not the strongest, the fastest, the most aggressive. They were actually the ones that were most willing to seek a non-violent end of the situation. Okay, family society was not built on a matriarchal or patriarchal society base. It was literally built on a joint effort. Whichever parent had the skill for that particular situation, they were the ones that dealt with it. Okay. So, I mean, you end up dealing with a lot of situation where it was very much a unified, a very equal society. Okay. See, the nice part, now I wasn't personally involved in the military. I dealt with them periodically, but because of the position I was holding, I ended up way outside of their realm more often than I cared to count. Primarily because I happen to be up in the top of the tower. Okay, in the communications hub, dealing with the rocket sciences that were going on. Because needless to say, if we had people coming and going, and they don't show you this I don't know how much is recorded of this as far as the information on Earth goes. But I think the reason a lot wouldn't have been said, is because of this issue of perceptual evasive tech. Okay. As in, they could cloak their ships coming in, you'd never see them. Old Earthlings could not see the stuff coming in. Now, people keep talking about, when are the off-worlders, when are the aliens going to attack us? We're getting ready for an invasion. Well, rest assured, let's just take a look at the Atlanteans. You can't see their ships. You can't hear their ships, and they've got lasers that make a hellbore look like a mild spotter laser. They've got weaponry that will punch holes clean through a planet. Now, if you can't see them or hear them, okay, your city, if you're working on still making your own clay by hand, making your own bricks by hand, then what you end up with is a society capable of wiping everything on the planet without even blinking. They had no interest in it. The Atlanteans were very science-based. They were very knowledge-based. Okay. And even when you take a look at it, we take a look at games that have gone the way of the dodo bird. I've forgotten more about tactics in chess than I ever thought was possible. Okay. But their standard games were all what many people call highbrow. Okay. You'd be taking a look at literally fourth dimension. When I talk about fourth dimensional chess, I don't mean like third dimensional is easy. You've got your width, you've got your height, you've got your depth. or length width, depending on who you're talking to. Fourth dimensional chess. If you know anything about chess at all, it's played on 64 squares. Okay, 8 by 8, and you're only running, back and forth. I learned when I was a kid how to play something called cylindrical chess, where the two outside edges, all the pieces moved the same way, but the two side edges were joined. So you could literally step from here off this side and end up back on this side and carry on. Made for a whole lot of entertainment. Now, my brother, the one that just recently passed away, designed a global chess where you could go off the front and off the back. And of course, if you've watched Star Trek, there was a 3-dimensional chess where they had the different levels on the chessboard. But the Atlanteans, greetings, Mr. Timmer. How we doing? The Atlanteans had a game of chess, a variation on it, called temporal chess. It was still set up on a standard 8 by 8 grid. Okay. And you could use the other variations, but the temporal version meant you could move a piece forward and go, that piece, I'm locking him out of cycle for three moves. Okay. Anybody could come in and land on that cycle, okay, and sit there, or could pass through it. It wouldn't matter. But when the end of that cycle was called, that missing piece would come back into play. Okay. And when that piece came back into play, it was just as though they had landed and taken the place that was sitting there. Yeah, so you couldn't sit there in ambush. But if you sat there too long, that ship and that piece would rematerialize and you'd lose yours. Okay. This was one of their neat little games, and this was taught when they were children. So of course your real master chess players would have half their pieces on temporal lockdown. You can picture how much fun that's going to be. So were the Atlanteans far more advanced intellectually than humans? Absolutely, and frankly, they still are. The difference is that Atlanteans are still far more peaceful than humans. Okay, they looked at the issue of the people that were poor that could not afford, and they didn't have the talent, whatever reason. Okay. Yeah, this is one of those neat little things. Angels are life. And what she said is that her son started playing at 7, much like I did. When I was a kid, I don't know how old I was awful young. I learned to play chess and then taught my little brother how to play chess. And this was just normal. And of course, you play with aunts, uncles. Chess is a very intellectually stimulating game. Okay, but it's not all about, it's not all about conflict, all about war by any functional stretch. But the Atlanteans, not only did they go for the peaceful side of things, but they were very much on the artistic side. Okay, which is why if you take a look at what little there is to see, okay, much of their clothing was very light fitting. But you got to remember, the reason most of their clothing was light fitting, was very light cloth, was because where they were living, where the capital city was sitting, it was extremely hot, so you wanted the lighter clothes. Okay, you really required the thinner clothing and the brighter colors. Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but darker colors draw the heat. If you're already in a hot spot, you don't desire to bring a whole pile more heat. It just doesn't make any functional sense. So, I mean, all in all, we have an interesting situation of people turning around and having to work through, they were trying to make society a whole lot more comfortable, a lot more interlocked. And they did include the locals in it. This is why there are reports of the people going in these huge towers. I mean, I don't honestly know how many stories up they were, but I can't look at a normal story and look at a normal building day and tell you. I can tell you that the main tower that I worked in, the spire I was on, was almost 200 stories high. Now you can picture how that would look to people that are only building buildings that at the most are 3 stories. Okay, we were building towers, and the reason for the height was because when we were up there, we had to have the clear line to get communication lines out to the satellite communities. Okay, or in all fairness, to watch them, because the optical ability of the Atlanteans was better than what we've got today. Far better. Okay, when we were sitting in the tower, you could watch what was going on. Didn't matter where you were. Okay, now they did end up developing the baseline, and they did develop local matter relay. Okay, as in teleport paths. Okay, it wasn't until after Atlantis left Earth, and we'll get to that in a little while, but it wasn't until Atlantis left that they actually developed the long-range transporters. Now, do understand, other races already had them. Atlantis is not the Atlanteans are not the most advanced. And yes, in answer to the question nobody's gotten around to asking, I will be in volume 2 of Races of the Worlds. I will be including the Atlanteans. Okay, and some of the information around them. They were a very peaceful, very happy family. Okay. Okay. The getting from one floor to the next. If you take a look at it in Star Trek and local science fiction vernacular, you got from one floor to the next, often in a boom tube. Okay, you'd step into a individual, because they'd have clusters of essentially individual elevators, but it was all computer operated, so you didn't end up with this issue of running into each other. For cargo, they had a couple of ways of doing it. Most of the time, it was just moved onto a matter relocation table, and it was just literally teleported up. Although they did have, for some of the delicate stuff that was from a molecular standpoint unstable. JCL, glad to see you. For some of the molecularly unstable, or not unstable as an explosive, but just wasn't holding together quite as well as they'd like, they would literally fly it from one building to another, or from one floor to another. And then, of course, you did have the wingnuts that would go out and climb the walls just because they could. But understand, when you're dealing with people that had some of their toys, you'd look at them today, humans would look at them and go, this doesn't make a lot of practical sense. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, YJ. YJ's just telling you, just reminding us to keep an eye out for the blood moon, for the lunar eclipse tonight. So all in all, we have an interest, and I will do my best to get out there too. It depends on how long, what time. I haven't checked for the time of it yet. But due to the fact I usually end up crashing at this point, especially with my back doing what it has, I usually end up crashing somewhere between 10 and 10:30. And Nightmare, glad to see you got here. Just a quick little update. What are we up to here? We've got 8 in the room. Now, this is still a very small pocket, and I would love to get to the size that I've seen some of these people show up. Like in some of these shows, they'll come on and they've got like 10,000 people on. I know Dave's got something like 15 that he's got, but Dave's been at it for a while. You know, I'm quite happy with just simply being able to get it working. Couldn't get on here last night because my whole system shut down on me. But the transportation between buildings, if they were ground floor, you just walk. You know, they did have stairs and what have you, but when you started getting up to the upper levels, you ran into some interesting problems. Like, who wants to take a staircase 200 floors into the atmosphere, or worse? You know, of course, especially when you start taking a look at some of the aerial platforms, they'd have an umbilical connection whereby you could actually where communication was solid, but it was a case of being able to get up into the atmosphere to really take the readings properly, instead of relying on degradation as the readings came down. They'd extend the antenna right into the upper stratosphere. I'll tell you, if Earth had space travel at that point, or satellites, it would have been a whole lot more complicated to explain what went down. You know, but so many people, you know, there were so many people. I can't tell you what the population was of Atlantis. I can tell you that we lost a staggering number when Atlantis departed, but that was because of a mess. But society itself, amongst the Atlanteans, even between the capital city and the satellite communities that were built using modern tech, Atlanteans had a very unified society. Okay, they even ended up dealing with the locals in essentially the same fashion. You know, it was just a question of making certain that things were done in an equal fashion, because Atlanteans do not desire war. They don't get there, you know, they just never got there and got their buns in a knot and decided, oh, I want that piece of land, so I'm going to go take it. Not even from the locals. When they started dealing with the locals, they worked out trade agreements, they worked out access points, and yes, they absolutely worked out a work exchange program, because Terrans knew how to work the land. Atlanteans knew how to push a replicator button. Okay, Atlanteans, by the time they got here, were so far beyond local farming that they'd lost track of all of it. Well, I shouldn't say all of it. Back on their homeworld, there are still people that farm on small amounts. Okay, you still have your diehard farmers, even on Atlantis. Okay, but the diehard farmers were not the ones that wanted to go and take a look at this new world that they had discovered. The diehard farmers on Atlantis were the ones that went, I'm happy here, why do I have to move? I mean, like, you take a look at me. Okay, now I'm not a farmer by any means, but I live in an apartment where I have no yard work, I've got no stairs, and the price is excellent. Why would I possibly move? Now, Angels of Life is asking, in those tubes in Atlantis, I know you said the system was automated, but was there a flat platform one would stand on, as long as you weren't touching the walls? The answer to that is that was the primitive one. That was the earliest versions. They used a magnetic pulse to take that platform and rifle it up to whichever floor. And it was a reverse pulse that was only set around the edge of the tube itself, so it would hit the edge of the platform. But you are right, it was used. Okay. And the reason you never wanted to touch the wall was because it would tear your hand off. It'd be kind of like running your hand across sandpaper at a really high speed. That's just bad, Robert. Robert writes, Die Hard Farmers. Yippee-ki-yay, mother pumpkins. Well, certainly left it look like razor blades. I'll just bet, Robert, that you were a fan of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes too. That was a silly show, but that takes you way into a different topic. But no, the early technology, they were using the physical landing and the physical pads to stand on, and that, of course, that was still what they were using for the larger cargo bays that they wanted to move major chunks up when it was molecularly stable. If it wasn't stable, then they would do it a slower method, but that was just so it didn't fall apart. Yeah. Unfortunately, Angels Are Life, I remember being on that when somebody didn't listen. And I'll tell you, the cleanup crew was at it for weeks trying to get it cleaned. The guy himself, well, they buried him in name. But you got to remember, if you ever got clipped by one of those things and got caught wrong, it would just pull you apart. Whole new definition of a paint job. But the same thing could be said for a lot of the vehicles they used. It wasn't just, you weren't just like in today's amusement rides. They say keep your hands in. The stupid part was, when I was a kid, they tell you keep your hands in, and you were relied upon to keep your hands in. In today's world, the amusement parks have guards to stop you from being able to put your hands out. The Atlanteans were firm believers in what humans came to call the Darwin Awards. Okay, they figured if you weren't smart enough to follow the rules that were there, because they'd be explained extremely well why they were there, right? And if you were dumb enough to go, oh, it doesn't apply to me, then they'd bury you, and that'd be the end of that. Yeah, the only difference there, poetically mistaken. In my opinion, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, it was silly, absolutely. But at least it held my attention better than the Little Shop of Horrors. But no, when Atlanteans talked about safety protocols, they literally went, this is the protocol. And if somebody screwed up, they didn't lock down the entire community. They didn't tell everybody, oh, we're going to put a safety guard in to stop people like him. What they would do, and I kid you not, it was funny to watch. On occasion, what they would do, they'd have too many accidents, and they'd say, okay, everybody, we have this law, and we have this law for a reason. Now, if you don't believe the law applies to you, i.e., if you don't believe that the law that states, keep your hands off the walls, does not apply to you, and you should be able to touch it, go right on in. We've got this one tube for you to do just that. You're more than welcome to do it. And they would get lineups of people to go and try this. But after about the fourth person got scratched, the lineup would dissipate and nobody else would touch the wall again. The answer to your question there, YJ is asking, did I watch Jupiter Ascending? And if so, how close is it to reality? They did a phenomenal job in replicating the appearance of the Tormenon. Okay. Basically the Tormenon, they got them down to a pretty solid art. I've got to watch it again because it's been a while. Only I don't know where I'm going to find it. But no, I remember when I first looked at it, and I'm looking at what they did with the Tormenon, I'm going, boy, did somebody ever get the right answer there. There are a few of the directors that have it, but they did a beautiful job on Mobian Society and the interaction with them. But yeah, they'd line up people. They wouldn't line them up. They'd say, okay, if you feel that if you are of the opinion that you should be able to touch these walls. We've cleared things out because we keep having problems with it. So we've got this one tube, and you can lower this one bank of tubes, depending on how many people they had. And they'd open the tube up, and they'd say, okay, if you want to touch the walls in this tube, go right ahead. It's built exactly the same way as the rest of them. And it did eliminate a lot of the question. You know, it's kind of like saying, if you think you should be able to go down the outside of that spire, okay, this is stupid week. And they had a different word for it, but this is, you know, like for instance, this is rebellious week. If you think that you should be allowed to climb down the outside of that spire, knock yourself out. We've cordoned off the area. So when you fall, you won't hurt other people. And of course, the sad part was they'd take that surrounding area, they'd put the barricade up and go, stay outside. And it wouldn't be a warning, don't go in here. It would be, if you go in here and you die, that's your problem. Because people will be falling. They were pretty clear cut. Yeah. Let's get YJ goes, DuckDuckGo says Jupiter Ascending is on Netflix. I'm going to have to look it up. Yes, very much, Robert. Very much the early Darwin Awards. Gotta do that. Considering I've got three different, other than the monitor I'm looking at here, I've got three other monitors that I can work with. Which is great from my standpoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pop this up. This is what's called live. So I'm allowed to do this because, well, I'm the one on here. And all I'm doing is moving it down to see if I can track it down. There we go. Then we go to Netflix, and I'm not going to move it on, so don't panic on that. One of the the reality is technology and I argue a lot on what works and what doesn't. But I'm just calling it out in real time here. Let's see if it actually pops up. And sad to say, Jupiter Ascending does not appear to be here. It's got Jupiter's Legacy, but that doesn't look like, I'm wondering if that is, I'm going to have to watch that one anyway. But the actual movie Jupiter Ascending is not currently on Netflix. It's unfortunate, but I'm not seeing it here at all. So I will have to look elsewhere. But thank you very much for the suggestion. Oh, yeah, I watched They Live years ago. Thanks, Robert. Robert says it's not on Netflix in Australia either. Yeah, They Live. They Live is an interesting situation because here's the funny part about that movie, and that one's been decades since I've watched. But the funny part about They Live is those people doing that type of people, what humans call zombies, and I call modern humans, except for the fact the skin falls apart. They Live is actually a very normal thing. Okay. Now I'm not entirely certain about the whole storyline anymore. I mean, heck, from the 80s, that would have had to been the early 80s because Roddy Piper was still wrestling at that time. But it was an interesting movie, that's for certain. The nice part about what we're talking about here, many of these science fiction movies, contrary to popular belief, have a solid backbone to them. Okay. Then when you're looking at Jupiter Ascending, those are Tormenon. This book here, where are we? I'm getting my artist to do it. But I'm going to show you something here. If you take a look at this, okay, this chap here, this tall guy right here, that is a Srazazian. Now, if you look down here, there's a normal mace for a Srazazian. And this guy in the middle that's holding onto the sword, this one, that's a standard-sized human. Okay, which gives you an idea of the size of these people. Now, the Tormenon are about the same size. They're around the 8-foot mark. Okay, but it's really neat when you see them interact because those two races are actually related. Okay. But this is why I say when you're dealing with people this size, when mankind comes up with the idea of, oh, we'll just, we'll beat them back with our sticks and stones. No, you won't. It's just that simple. I mean, that mesa I was just showing you, the one with the spikes, that is about the size of a medicine ball. And that is just a normal hand-to-hand weapon for them. But it's solid metal. And by the way, no, it's not made out of steel. That was one of the other things the Atlanteans were working on in the way of technology. Oh, yeah, well, that's because Angels in Life, the tones that you're talking about, that was, and because tones carried further, a static tone or a series of tones worked better than trying to formulate it into a language. They had certain tone patterns. Okay, kind of like a phone ringing, not that kind of a bell, but that sort of an idea where you put a sequence of tones in a repeat cycle. Okay, a variation, if you will, on what mankind developed in the way of Morse code. Okay, but it wasn't just tones that they'd use because they would combine tones with optics. Because the tone would only go so far, the optics could be relayed across the city. Kind of like a really highly advanced emergency broadcast system. And the neat problem there, the only time we had a problem at one point when we were first installing it, and they got the optics wrong. And we had 3 or 4 days where people were literally not able to work because everybody was temporarily blinded. It's kind of like if you hit the tone wrong, and this is what humans don't get. Some humans do. There are tonal frequencies that can knock people out, that can literally kill people. Now, human scientists know a lot about this. Okay. And yes, they did figure it out of their own accord. This was not something the off-worlders gave them. Okay, but like on Earth today, there are certain days or certain times that were relegated as, I don't want to say they relegated them as holy times, but they were very special times, but usually they revolved around family get-togethers to ensure the family community stayed together. So when we're talking about these tones going off and drawing people to a meeting place for a meal, that didn't mean you had to go to this one central place and sit down for a meal there. It meant you're taking a break, go home. Okay, there's a shift change because while most of this equipment could not be left alone, it had to run 24/7. Especially when you're talking about matter replicators. Exactly, YJ. Okay, for the Atlanteans, society was important, but family was the backbone of it. Angels in Life is just saying the U.S. government uses that technique as a form of weapons now. It severely affects the human equilibrium. Exactly. Now, the funny part about it is the Atlanteans knew how to reverse that. In other words, they knew how to take that incoming tonal sound and turn it around and turn the whole thing inside out. I'll bet that had a lot of fun. Hopefully, Robert, when they pulled that major wedding, hopefully you didn't have any susceptible epileptics in the party at that point, in the room at that point. Growing up epileptic, not necessarily a fun thing for people. But they found the same thing, and this is one of the reasons why the Atlanteans had to modify things a little. Okay, because what they found was when they were using the sound waves and the magnetic pulse, it would screw up the local wildlife. And when I talk about Atlanteans being very peaceful, they did not want to disrupt the local life, and that included the local plant life, by the way. See, one of the things that you have to look at is the way society was run, the way the Atlantean society was running was literally, we are here. Nature was here first. We're going to come in. We're going to settle it. We're going to settle into it, and we're going to work with the local, with the local ebb and flow of energy, and the local peoples. So yeah, they absolutely did trade with the locals. Okay, the Atlanteans had much finer clothing, much more functional clothing in the way of heat reflective, that sort of thing. Whereas the locals have more durable clothing. And for some of the Atlanteans that came here, because they were looking for the real experience, they would look at the local clothing. Yeah, it was a little more uncomfortable, but really not as uncomfortable as you might think. Okay, but the two societies were pretty closely meshed. Absolutely. This is what you're talking about here, JCL, is you're talking about sonic weapons. Okay, and sonic and magnetic weapons do exist today without and they will cause cellular disruption. Some of them can cause accelerated cellular degradation. Literally speaking, if you hit a corporeal vessel with the right frequency, you can physically make the poor thing melt. Okay, and these are only at the beginning stages of discovery from a Terran standpoint. Picture what happens when mankind gets these advanced a little further, and picture just how much damage that can be done with those weapons when taken to their ultimate level. If you can melt matter by sound wave, what happens if you get a big enough weapon to hit the side of a planet? Do you really have any defense against it? As humans go. Fortunately, the experimentation that the off-world and that the Atlanteans were doing with that sort of technology was they would work it up to a certain point, and then they would turn around and develop a defense against it. Which means you hit the Atlantean main capital city with anything, and they could take that. They'd already developed the technology to modify things, and it was based on the idea that working as a complete community. So you take the kids, and the kids were wonderful, because what they do with the kids, and I'm referring to the little wee ones, is they let the kids into lower grade things to see what children would do. So of course, you take, for instance, the boom tubes. They'd let the kids into low grade boom tubes and understand. They knew what the potential was, so they would have medical crews standing nearby. Okay, and they would test it to make sure that a child would, and this is why, if quite frankly, Angels of Life, if you think about it, there was always that lower end of the boom tube that had a little bit of a lip on it, and that was to stop anybody under 5 years old, assuming they were normal height, from getting their fingers against it. But they'd have that physical barrier to avoid an accidental bump, okay, or an accidental or curiosity thing from a child. From the adults, they figure if you hadn't figured it out by the time you got old and got tall enough to touch that wall, because that bottom sheath would vibrate to the point that it was annoying. So if a child touched it, they'd feel the vibration, but it wouldn't actually do any damage. Okay, But when you got tall enough that you could reach over it, by then, the theory was that you would have the brains to not touch it. Yeah, and that's that's just in Angels Are Life. It's a wonderful thought. I mean, I liked watching Independence Day, where they said, let's take a modern earthbound computer and build a program to override alien technology. And my first thought when I saw that was, okay, I'll tell you what, take an abacus and design it to interface with a modern computer, because that's going to work about as well. But Atlantean society was built on the idea that if the home is stable, if the home is secure, then we've got a society, then we've got a building block to make society. It's kind of like when early humans were first learning to make bricks. They had to figure out how to build a brick secure enough to be able to stack something on top of it. Okay. Well, I mean, if you take a look at it, take a look at what happened with the Leaning Tower of Pisa. They didn't understand geology at the time, so they put all this weight on it and then it tilted. And of course, with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, it was built in 3 stages, and every time it sank a little further, so they'd have to compensate. So the Atlanteans were very aware that they needed a backbone, and this is one of the things that I've been talking to people about on the journey. You have to realize that people have to work together. You've got to get the home front stable. You've got to get the individual stable in order for society to move in a stable direction. If not, it's like everybody driving wherever they desire to. And I know some countries in the world today do not have driving laws like we do in Canada or in the US. Okay, where everybody, in all fairness, most of the world countries have laws that say, okay, if you're driving a vehicle, you drive on this side of the road, you go that direction. Okay, or on this side of the road, you all go that direction. There are some countries that don't seem to pay attention to that. Okay, and I'm sure some of you have traveled a whole lot more than I have on Earth. Probably not so much where it comes to off-world. But being as I am not an astronomer, okay, I don't pay much attention to it, and I get lost easily on Earth. You can picture how easy it would be for me to get lost elsewhere. I mean, I've lived in the same city, right in Kelowna, BC here, for 40 years now, and I still get lost in the downtown core. So, needless to say, I don't go there. Okay, it's just that easy it's that simple of a decision from my standpoint. But when we talk about the technology for moving information, and of course they did have, well, the other thing they had a lot of, and you didn't see a lot, again, we have this cloaking thing, because inside the capital city, they had around the outside of it, they had buffer fields to stop people from seeing. They got inside, they could certainly see some of it. Okay, but it was normal for people to hang glide, to essentially either hang glide, or what the heck is it called? A flying wing, I think. There's a suit that literally looks like you're a flying squirrel. And there were the youngsters that would jump from one balcony and glide down to the next. This was just their normal route. Because they did have their entertainment. The other thing, when we go back and talk about those tones that we were talking about a little earlier, you want a concert like a music concert, they would just simply fire it through those tubes. Poetically mistaken, it's the wingsuit I was thinking. The Parawing, Robert, is an earlier version of it, from my understanding. But both of those suits you'd see those all over the place. But they didn't give that technology, much as many people would desire to take it with them. The reason that the Atlanteans did not turn that over was twofold. One, their buildings were not tall enough to do it. And two, they didn't have the humans did not have the reflex capacity at the time to actually safely do it and to safely utilize those. Yeah, I'm just reading here. YJ, I am curious how long ago you lived here. Not surprised we didn't meet considering the length of time I've been hiding from people. But yeah, there were a couple local pot dealers. What YJ was saying was, when I lived in Kelowna, I had a dream that a fleet of black triangles were passing over. Well, we still have black triangles passing over here. Okay. And it wouldn't surprise me to find a pot dealer, named Tattoo. Wouldn't be a surprise to find him being an actual tattoo artist. Oh, that's okay. Yeah. See, I was here. Well, I got here in 1980, and I have barely lived outside of here since. But no, the neat little part of things, when you're dealing with the way society works, when you're dealing with off-worlders, it's actually quite normal for the low-grade ones to take up a local job that is not mainstream. They take up a local job. They will not get into mainstream politics. They are absolutely forbidden to get into a mainstream, CEO position of a major company. Because there's still this thing of contaminating the locals. So apparently instead they just feed them pot. But, let's face it, modern locals are using that regularly anyway. Well, yeah. That's just it. The underwater, you got to remember, when you're dealing with aircraft, with craft that are capable of entering orbit or going beyond it, going into the ocean is easy. Okay, and of course we have other races living under the ocean. You would not believe the sea elfid society and what's under at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. It's going to be a while before people get there. But that was a riot when I found that one out. Yeah, exactly. YJ's just saying, just fly under the radar and observe. And that's what they do. They come in, they interact with people. Even back in Atlantis, they were very clear. Yes, you can interact, you can live amongst them. If you desire to live, in a more rustic approach, be our guest. Okay, but you are not turning over certain technologies. There are certain things that you cannot pass on to people. And that worked really well for the longest time. But there came a point where it became problematic. Okay, because the Atlanteans were here for for centuries, quite frankly. It wasn't they were just here for a couple of decades. They were here for a very long time. And this is what is not recorded, and as far as I understand it, in the mainstream literature that you find now, in the research papers and what have you. But Atlantis was not just here for a few decades. It was here for well over 150 years. Okay. And that's why, yes, they've got society, but they built there, and the stuff they were building when they got here was locally built using local technique. So much of the stuff that you'll find in some of these odd places where all of a sudden, well, we didn't know there was a society out here. It may well have been an Atlantean society, an Atlantean satellite society. Because when Atlantis itself actually left, it left everybody behind. Like, it left all of the Outlander, all of the satellite communities behind and sheared them off completely. Of course, they didn't get a lot of options on the leaving part. Because what had happened was society had evolved, and much as human society kept doing its thing its way. Hey, greetings, Carl. Glad you could make it. And latest update, right now we have 10 people that are at least connected, which is a nice little move. I mean, I was really happy the first time I went live. I ended up with I forget how many because I didn't think to write it down. Make that 11. This is what I'm hoping to see happen is as the months go by here that I get a much wider following. Okay. And the thing is, I don't do research. What I'm talking about is what I remember dealing with. The things that I dealt with and what I watched happen. Now, when society opened up, when the Atlanteans started to interact a little bit more readily with the locals, there was greetings, Donna. Glad you can make it. Like I was mentioning earlier there, Donna, I was supposed to be on yesterday as well, but I had a major computer glitch where my mic wouldn't actually open the door. I just couldn't get it to work. It worked for half of my stuff and not for the rest. So I ended up missing yesterday, and I'm betting dollars to donuts I'm going to run into that problem again. Of course, I ended up missing doing Journey yesterday as well. Yeah. Which is, it was really kind of annoying, but what the heck. But things are moving again, so I'm happy on that end. Where are we here? 4:45. Yeah, Carl's just mentioning he woke at 4:45. It is now 9:19 p.m. Oh, you're over in England, aren't you there, Carl? Or somewhere over in that area. But, from my standpoint, absolutely. The neat part there, JCL, is I'm working on a number of different projects, right? And I'm still, I did the one thing. I am in the process of documenting my many past lives. That's one of the books I'm working on. And one of the neat things about talking about it is I rattle it off as it's coming to me. And what I'll be able to do after this show is I'll be able to go back through, listen to it, and just pick up pieces to add into that particular chapter of the book that I'm working on. Now, of course, that's going to take me a while because I think I've got, if I remember correctly, I've got 20 lifetimes on this on Earth that I remember. Yeah, Carl, I sit here, I get up in the morning, and yes, I drink a lot of coffee, but in addition to coffee, I end up drinking a lot of lemon water. In case you're wondering why I just stopped, all of a sudden the world just decided to go vertigo on me. And that happens for me periodically. So I'm just going to stand up here and open the window. Unfortunately, my temperature does some really stupid things on occasion. And it goes right through the roof. Net result, I end up with vertigo. It's an annoyance, but what the heck. But no, what we end up with, when you look at this issue of doing these videos, somebody asked me the other day, they asked me about, they had never heard of life on a Tartarian lifetime. Tartarian, by the way, is essentially life in what you may know as hell. You may know it as hell, you may know it as purgatory. Well, it won't be purgatory, but It's not a nice place to visit. On the other hand, it depends on who you are. But by going through these, and this might be the road to go, okay, because when I'm dealing with the journey, I focus primarily on the house and the home. When I deal with spaced out radio, most of that is, well, it is. It's very much, in case you hadn't noticed, I still like dealing with questions directly from people. I find it easier. But on spaced out radio, I deal very much on the UFO side of things. Okay. And the personal interactions that other people have. Okay. I was going to tangle with some of the bigger topics that we run into on Earth and got summarily trounced for it. Well, I had my hand slapped. Okay. So I'm just not going there. The topics I was going to be looking at, quite frankly, were some of the major issues around the world that we're dealing with. Things like the way the political system, the education system, the medical system, where these places are running into hiccups. And that's not necessarily going to happen all that well. However, when I take a look at the entirety, when you take a look at the way the Atlantean social system is set up, okay, the Atlantean social system is one of the best where it comes to a family-oriented or a community-oriented society. They are very much a unified society. And the only one I can think of offhand that is more at peace with themselves than the only one that I can think of that is more at peace with themselves than what Atlantis is the Mobian Society. Okay. And the Mobian Society evolved here on Earth about 30,000 years before the Atlanteans got here. And then the Mobians evolved to a certain point and they decided they were going to leave. Complete sidetrack for you people. Carl, if you can get a hold, if you're talking to me, which really boils down to you've got to have a really open mind to start with. If you can find either a Reiki master or a Chinese trained acupuncturist, Chinese trained, he doesn't have to be Chinese, okay, but he's got to be Chinese trained. They've got a better deal with it. Okay, if you can find one of those two types of people to open up your foot chakras, and if you ask them if they don't know what a foot chakra is, frankly, you don't want to deal with them. But ask them if they can open up your foot chakras. You may find it has some remarkable impact on your COPD. I will not guarantee anything except for if you're suffering from it. I'm a firm believer if you're suffering from something that you might want to find a way to deal with it. Personally, I've got a heart that every now and again just up and quits. So if I keel over while I'm sitting here looking at you, don't worry, it'll take me a few minutes. I'll be back. But you take a look at that. I dealt with somebody that had major problems. She was actually stuck in a wheelchair. And by opening her foot chakras up, we pulled her out of the wheelchair. And a year or so after we pulled her out of the wheelchair, she never went back to it. But about a year or so afterwards, I ran into her again. Turned out when she came to me in the first place, when she came to me in the first place, she had already been in the wheelchair for 3.5 years. But there are alternative methods. But the trick is they are not used on their own. Use them always in tandem with what you know. It's okay. I did that one day. It was funny. In all fairness, JCL, and I know it's a little bit of a sidetrack from Atlantis, but I pulled it off there too. But when I was 5 years old, I ended up dead long enough for them to actually tag me and move me to the morgue. Fortunately, they put me on a table. So, of course, at 5 years old, I woke up in the morgue. They had diagnosed me dead. I didn't agree, so I left. That was confirmed by my father on his deathbed. I mean, it was confirmed before that, but it was reiterated again after that. You know, but no, the human body is easy to repair if you let it. But the thing is, modern science has come a long way in dealing with a lot of it. And I'll tell you, when I snapped my arm, I would not have wanted just an acupuncturist or an acupressurist or a Reiki master to go working on my arm. Okay, I ended up going to an actual surgeon to put my arm back together. And I'll tell you, I would much rather have had that happen. I would get them to do my knees, but my one knee. But the doctors have told me flat out the only way they can guarantee it'll work is to buck it off at the hip and start over. So I think I'll just deal with it as is. But the Atlanteans figured out that society had to operate. You had to have a stable home unit. You had to have a stable family unit, stable bricks in order to build buildings. So everything was geared towards that. You never had people sitting on the street going, oh, give me money because I don't, I don't have any money. I need to eat and I just can't. I can't afford it. You never had that. Did you have people sitting on the street going, I don't want to work? Absolutely. But that was where the workers came from. Because what they did was something absolutely brilliant, what the Atlanteans did. Because there were, in every society, you'll always find lazy people somewhere. Okay. But what the Atlanteans turned around and did was they went, okay, you're saying you don't want to work, you can't work, and we know otherwise. We've already checked out. You're not physically disabled, not unable to work. You're just not desiring to. Well, I don't like this job. Well, okay, that's fine. You're going to work. And they would hire one person. They would take one government employee that would run a crew of 20 to 25 people that did not want to work. Okay, or that could not, for whatever reason, work. And they would take them out and they would have them do the street cleaning. They'd have them wash down the walls, to make sure everything and to polish certain walls. There were a lot of buildings, especially when you were looking at the power grids. Okay, they ran on heavy optic and heavy solars, heavy wind, and they went on the primary side of it. Okay, well, in order to work properly on the solar wind and on the heat, because what they had was they had their solar panels, but they also had a heating system that was wired throughout the entire city. So when they would take these people that were unwilling to work and unwilling to learn to work, and they would go, okay, you're working X number of hours today to polish these grids to make sure that they are running at peak efficiency. You do that, and we automatically give you what you require in the way of food and housing. Now, clearly, if you had taken on a job voluntarily, like you could go and get the same job. For instance, let's say you did want to work, but you weren't overly well educated, right? But you could polish, and you go, look, I'm not educated. I just don't have the skills for this. But can I get a job working on this crew? If you voluntarily went to work for a city maintenance like that, you would get paid a better wage than if you were forced to. Because what they would do is they'd say, okay, you're working your way so you can find your own place to live, and you'll pay your own rent and what have you in the same way. Okay, it was a man-hour trade-off thing. But if you were refusing to work, you'd get put into a barracks. And part of that money that you were supposed to be being given would be used to maintain the building that you were living in. And by the way, that was the funny part about it. Is the Atlanteans would turn around and go, okay, you're polishing these. One of the jobs that you do that you don't get paid for is the heating panels in this unit. You guys are responsible for. You don't get paid for it. It's part of your own natural upkeeping. Okay, kind of like in modern day in Terran homes in the Western world, right? And presumably in England. Okay, if your carpet gets dirty, it's up to you to vacuum it or to hire somebody to come in and do it. Okay, same idea. But you get paid a better wage if you applied for work. And of course, the neat part was there was enough to do. There was never a shortage of work. I mean, let's face it, when you're dealing with a city where the walls are polished in order to make certain that they maintain a certain level of equal heat. And you got to remember the communication lines were done the same way. I've actually got when I talk about the schematics, I've got the design of a power generator from that period. Okay, it combines heat, water, and wind. Okay, and it actually will it will also combine thermal. Problem is, you have to have the right location to put it in thermal. Have I got one built? No, I do not know modern science. Okay, I got thrown out of modern science in grade 8. Was thrown out of chemistry and out of biology because my own system didn't work the way they could cope with, as near as I can figure out anyway. So, I mean, when I look at that, do I have the schematics drawn out in rough? The answer is yes, but there are no numbers involved. So, for somebody sent me a picture of part of a teleport machine. Now, they didn't know what it was. They sent it to me. I went, this is what it's for. This is how it fits. I know what they're doing with it. I just don't know how to translate it into human, into Terran science. Okay. It's kind of like I hear songs going off and I know what they are. I know what the tunes are. There is not a snowball's prayer that I can write music. But the Atlantean, life on Atlantis was a riot in a lot of ways. Now, in my case, I wasn't much of a fun person. Okay, I literally, in all fairness, very few of the barracks dwellers had their own families. Some did. But the thing there was usually you'd have one barracks for singles and another barracks for family units. Okay, it was still the same applied. The only people that did not have to work were the ones that were 5 years and younger. And that came from any level of society. You could be a multi-millionaire in Terran terms. And your kids, if they were over 5 years old, had a job to do. They were put to work. And it's not a question of they were put to work because let's have slave labor and let's only pay them minimum. It was a question of, okay, they're doing this job. If you're 6 years old and you're able to do the job, you get paid the same as if you're 25 years old and able to do the job. They didn't have an age difference. They didn't care what color you were. They didn't even care if you were from Atlantis. If you came on to mostly of the locals that came in would end up doing jobs like street cleaning and polishing because they just did not have the intellectual backbone to be able to get into the higher workings. Okay. And that was not a discriminatory thing. That was a question of you don't take a farmer and let him loose in a nuclear reactor. It's just a bad idea. Really hard on the farmer. And this is just the way that society worked. And by the way, please tell me you've got a pen handy. And of course not. Looking for a pen here and I actually don't have one. Nice part about it though is I do have a computer that happens to have a word processor. So what I can do here, go all the way down here. And we go like this. What I'm making a note of is something that we just mentioned. Okay, and that would be Mobian Society. Now I've got a list of other topics I'll be dealing with, but this one I will add on to the list. This is why now do understand one very important factor here. When I add things onto the list, I do one topic. I'm aiming at one topic a weekend. Now, right now, I'm looking at like the Mobian Society. I've just added on, and I have to get up and go across the room and hope that I've got the sheet there. But the weekend I'll be dealing with the Mobian Society on, I will announce, but it's likely to be 2.5, 3 months down the road. Because I have to. Now, that being said, I'm quite willing to answer questions. Okay, but as far as an overall topic goes, okay, that one will be down the road because I literally, and I found this out, this is where that whole list thing I talk to people about works. And by the way, I use this, I tell people in other cultures the same thing. These tools that I talk about working with are literally ones that are universal. Okay. And I only recommend the ones that I personally use, when they apply to me. The one tool I've offered a lot of people is how to quit smoking without withdrawals. Now, I know it works because I've had hundreds of people come back to me and say it worked. Okay. But in all fairness, I've never tried it. Of course, I never started smoking. So I'm not about to start smoking to see if it worked. Okay. But the Atlanteans, they didn't believe in I can't work. If you were missing an arm, okay, you weren't going to do things like juggle. Well, actually, I've seen a one-arm juggler. But you could do things like go into the entertainment field, right? Something to improve society, because all of society's work does not have to be. It doesn't have to be incredibly intellectually challenging. It doesn't have to be trades. There are all sorts of things in society that are necessary. Okay. The Atlanteans did not believe in going, oh, you're handicapped, therefore, you're handicapped, you're missing, you're not thinking as fast as everybody else. Therefore, we're not going to expect you to carry your weight. Quite the contrary. What they found was the people that were having troubles were, well, yeah, in all fairness, yeah, and that works there. Carl's just saying he just took 3 months and quit cold turkey. Yeah, that's how I quit drugs and drinking. Was I just quit one day and just stopped. Right, I said, I'm done. And that was the end of it. But most people, in all fairness, Carl, from what I've seen, most people don't seem to have that ability. This is why I'm so happy with what they did in Canada where it comes to gambling addicts, where you can voluntarily go onto a block list, right? And they just, at least in BC, you go up to the counter and go, look, I've got a gambling problem. I need you to help me stop, and then put you on a ban list right then. But if you ever want to come off it, from what I gather, there's a 6 month period that they will keep very close eyes on you. So it's easy to get on the list. And again, the Atlanteans were very much in favor of the idea, if you have a problem, let's help. And by the way, here's the other thing that Atlantean Society did really quick. Okay. Yes, they absolutely had criminals. They had murderers. They were not immune to the social degradation problem. What they were immune to is they solved the problem really quick. Yes, some innocent people got caught in the crossfire. Okay, but bear in mind, they had developed a way of dealing with it that eliminated the problem. Yes, you had some people that had to be put to death because they were problems. They were uncontrollable, they were unreformable, but they didn't even sit around. Right? It's like, okay, you're charged. This is a streamlined system they did. Okay. You've been charged with this. They put you through the trial. You're allowed one appeal, and that will take place in less than a month. If you fail again, if you're convicted a second time, then the sentence get carried through. Now, their death row, the length of their death row was really short, like a week. So yeah, some people that were found out later to be innocent did die, absolutely. But they didn't have people sitting on death row for decades. They literally went, you're guilty, you're now in prison, you will deal with this time. But the neat part about it is when in their prison system was absolutely brilliant. You're in prison, we need this difficult job done. No, you're not getting paid, you're staying in prison. But we'll bring you out to do the workload. Okay. And of course, they would complain that they should get paid because they're doing the job. And the courts just flat out went, you broke the law. This is what you're doing. Now that we've had that discussion, you can cry to somebody else. It seems a little harsh in some cases. Yeah, I don't doubt that. Carl goes, I tried to heal myself and got arrested for not complying with mental health nurses and psychiatric doctors. Yeah, I just told the doctors I wasn't doing what they told me. They didn't arrest me. I was supposed to be on medication for my heart and for my blood pressure, right? And of course for diabetes. And I looked at them and went, ain't going to happen. Of course, in all fairness, Carl, the I spent 20 years with a psychiatrist. Right. And I was diagnosed with something that's a pain in the neck, but it's temporal dissociative disorder. And what that really translates into is I couldn't track time if my life depended on it. Angels in life, that is actually relatively easy. I did this, I think it was last week or the week before. But I'm going to show you again anyway because it's an ongoing thing that people really require. Okay, now do understand what I'm about to show you works in tandem with the modern doctors. This is not, you don't go, I'm not listening to the doctors. Okay, this is just a bad move. In my case, it works well for me, but I'm a very abnormal system. But the answer to your question, how do you heal yourself? Take your hands, put the palms towards each other, and you'll see, you can see between them. Okay, you bring them together about a 1/4 inch apart. You'll feel some sort of energy between your hands. Okay, and it's that energy that you want to focus on, or more to the point that you desire to focus on. You'll feel a little bit of a pulse there. Now understand, energy runs both directions at the same time. Bioenergy does. So you put your hands together just like this, about a 1/4 inch apart, and focus on one word. Heal. That's the only word you worry about. You don't have to understand the medical behind it. Okay, the doctors like to know what's causing the problem. You as an individual do not have to understand it. Okay, you run that single word through your head and your body already knows what the problem is, but it will double that energy back and it will send the healing energy where it is required. Okay, now when you're focusing on it, the way you get stronger is as you feel that pulse growing. Okay, you take that and you separate your hands a little as you go. Okay, now my hands, I can feel the pressure between my hands a lot for right here is just child's play for me. Okay, but I can literally feel that energy at full arm's length, like way out here. I can feel it further, but I need somebody else to test it, to experience it. Because I don't know about you, but I haven't figured out how to remove my arm yet. Yeah. Ain't that the truth, Carl? If you're not actually working for ways to heal yourself, it's called not healing yourself. And you can certainly wait for somebody else to do it. You know, I remember working for a boss one day that turned around and he'd come into work, and I was working at the computer. He looks at me and goes, "Keith, go get me, man. Go get me a tea." I never even blinked. And by the way, this is a bad way to do it. I didn't get fired. But I looked at my boss and I went, "What happened? You break both your arms?" I never moved a muscle to get up and go and get his tea. Because in my opinion, yes, he was my boss, but he was no better than I was. Okay, and that was the thing with the Atlanteans. Okay, and given like the time I was at, that might be part of the problem. But they're not the only society that that's happened with before. Okay. Now the other thing that you look at, and again, Angels of Life, one thing to keep in mind: if you are on medication right now, and this applies to everybody, if whatever you're suffering from, if you're on some sort of medication or some sort of mechanical aid, like for instance a CPAP machine, do not stop using it at all. Keep doing what you're told. Because what will happen is, as you work with this energy, as you focus and you tell yourself and you remind yourself to heal, the body will get rid of the necessity of these things. And the doctors will test and find out that you no longer need the medication. Let them do the deciding. Too many people I see get on the medication, and this happens more often with mental health issues than any other form that I've seen. And I'm no doctor. But too many people go, "Oh, I feel a little better today, so I'm not going to use my medication anymore." This whole issue of taking your energy and utilizing it to heal your own body does not mean that you don't need assistance. Now, to give you an idea how well that works, okay, I built the energy in one hand. When I snapped my right arm, I broke it so bad they had to bolt it. And when I utilized that energy, and all I did, same principle. Okay, you take your hands like this, right? Well, I did the same thing with my fingers and generated the energy between the fingers and my thumb. And same idea. As you feel that energy build, you separate your hand. Well, your fingers. Now, needless to say, you've got a lot less room to work with. But when I did that, all I did was run that energy down this arm, just this way. Okay. And it was a lot slower a lot of the time. But doing that, I took a completely snapped arm and healed the bone in 9 days. And that is very much the case. The funny thing there, YJ's just mentioning stem cells are literally just waiting around to be told what to do. That's the whole kicker. When you're utilizing this energy field, you're literally accessing directly the stem cells. You're doing the reprogram thing. Now, I talked to a neurologist, not a neurologist. I don't know what the name is. They work on nerves. Anyway, I was talking to him, and I asked him about this issue of the reprogramming cells to produce the myelin nerve sheath. And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, that's not possible." I says, "How about if we don't discuss what's possible and what's not? What I need to know is if that's all that's required." That in most mental misfunctions are a direct result of that kind of a problem. As it got explained to me when I had my stroke, that's what it did. It shorted things out. But here's the kicker. Modern science does not know how to grow that. Your body does. However, again, when you're in the care of a doctor and if you're in danger and you don't know how to deal with things, absolutely get your tail feathers to the doctor. At least they give you a better shot at it. Okay. See, they do that once in a while. Angels of Life says the ETs have already done a lot of the surgery. Neat part there is there are three different types of ET interaction. when we're dealing with the Zeta Reticuli, the gray, you've got the ones that are the few that are willing to help people, and they'll take on little cases like there's a damage here into your system. We're going to repair that for you. The majority of them are strictly scientists. They are simply tracking and watching what's going on. And then you've got the few that are sell the info to the highest bidder. Okay, but literally, you know, it is possible and this is done in tandem with the doctors. This is not something that is ever done without their input. Okay, and I say that, you know, do understand I refuse to go to doctors for a lot of reasons. I told my kids if I'm not unconscious, I'm not going to the hospital. That's me personally. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, contrary to popular belief, doctors have learned a fair chunk. Okay, and the people around you have learned a lot. Okay, now the neat part here is I may run into a problem. Something just crossed my mind here, so I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, we may run into an issue. Okay, so I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. Because of what I've just said, I don't know what's going to happen. But YouTube keeps a very close eye on what they're dealing with. And this is why I tell you, these tools get used in tandem with things. But if I end up getting my hand slapped for telling you that, yes, it's possible to accelerate your healing. Okay. If I get my hand slapped or I get blocked out of this for a while, you'll have to understand that side of it. Your body absolutely does. And that's the whole kicker. Right there, YJ. Okay. If your body didn't know how to do it in the first place, you wouldn't be here. Okay. You'd be a bundle of raw nerves. But the natural way to do it, I will warn you that the one thing about using the naturopathic approach is that sometimes it doesn't work fast enough because the damage is degrading too quick. It's kind of like if you've got a leak in a dam. Okay. It's a great idea if it's not a leak in a dam, rather, but if you've got a break in the dam and it's plugging part of the river, sometimes you need something along the lines of dynamite, aka modern science, to blow that stream free so it doesn't flood the entire area. I'll take your word for that one, YJ. There's a lot of things that I tried eating one thing years ago, and I'll tell you, it's not bad health-wise, but it was an absolutely stupid move in my eyes. Somebody told me one day that this particular combination was great, and I mean, they absolutely lived by it because they would do it on a regular basis. They told me the ketchup and ice cream was a really tasty dessert. I'll tell you from personal experience, not a good option. I mean, you're welcome to try it. It's perfectly fine health-wise. You know. Yeah, and YJ, I agree. The problem there is, that's what I was saying when I got my hand slapped the other day, was that I do my best, even as you well know, on Spaced Out Radio. I regularly tell people that this is my opinion, and this is the way I look at the world personally. That, unfortunately, does not always hold water. Okay, at least not according to some industries. Okay, so I'm just giving people the heads up. I'll find out. I mean, the last time when it happened a couple of weeks ago, actually it happened, I think it was last weekend. It was within a day that I got the warning. Okay, so this is sort of a test run, but the reality of it is this. Okay, I will do what I can to help people as best I can. I will answer questions as clearly as I can. I used to get into a conflict with one person on a regular basis because I make a comment and they'd look at me and go, well, that's just your opinion. And I literally had to tell them multiple times before I cut communication. I said, look, everything I say is my opinion. I cannot be wrong in my opinion. But the facts I work with, as I found out in working with a member of the Church of Satan one day, I found out that my facts, that my information can be mistaken. And that's another story for another day. But hopefully this one goes off properly. But like I said, this is all worked together. Absolutely. Harmonic resonance. This is why harmonic resonance comes off the sonic side. Sonic, audio waves can heal. Okay, the flip side of healing is they can do just as much damage or more on the reverse side. But harmonic healing, or radionics, as I also looked into a long time ago. More to the point, the wife of my psychiatrist at the time had a doctorate in radionics. And again, it boils down to using different wavelengths of energy in targeting different aspects of your brain and or body in order to make things work properly. But what people seem to forget is all of these tools, and I like the way they put it in Doctor Strange, all of these tools, your chakras, your MRIs, your nerve layouts, the anatomy charts, they are all interconnected. And everyone that uses one of them, if they only use one, they are looking at only a portion of the answer because it is all interconnected. Now, that's just the reality of it. Okay. Now, of course, obviously you figured out how to find me in order to spread word, because the message I came back to this world to spread was literally to everyone in existence that working together, we can make this a better world for virtually everybody. Okay, and I do certainly ask you to spread this message, even to the people that don't have technology. Okay, because when I talk about everyone, by the way, I am referring to people, animals, plants, energies, you name it. Okay, and absolutely, you can certainly, if you look at the bottom of the video, you'll find all sorts of ways of getting a hold of me. Okay, drop me a line, but remember to tell me who you are. Okay. Remember to tell me who you are, where you're connecting. Of course, once you've connected with me and I've got that, I'll have it sorted out. Somewhere you'll probably be finding my phone number, and I will tell you, if you don't text me before phoning me, if I don't recognize the number, the odds are I'm not answering it. And yeah, I probably have an answering system, but since I don't go to it, it doesn't help much. Anyway, I'm going to call it a night. We are currently 10 o'clock at night. Okay. Now, I'll be doing another video on the journey tomorrow morning, and I will be back here next week. I'm going to have to take a look at my list. I'll be back here for a live feed next Saturday morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then Sunday night with the same topic from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Hopefully you will join me then. And absolutely, share it with your friends. And I will catch up with you again later. Thank you so much for the great questions. All the best. And until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive